Thank you, Sue. Yes, those children have given me a wealth of experience in a lot of different areas. But today I'm very excited to be here to talk in the Heart and Vascular series. We're going to be talking about the Mediterranean diet, and we're also going to touch on some recommendations for some intermittent fasting because that is definitely one of those popular kind of hot topics these days, as is just a good general healthy diet. And so once again, I appreciate everyone that's come. I know between the snow and the Super Bowl, this is actually quite a busy day. So let's get started. So today we're going to explore the heart health and general health benefits of the Mediterranean diet. And then at the end, get into a little bit on the intermittent fasting. So first, let's talk a little bit about what the Mediterranean diet actually is. Being very healthy makes sense that it is a plant-forward diet, which means that it includes lots of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And it's really encouraged that one or more of these shows up at every single meal. Also in the diet are lots of lean proteins, especially fish and seafood, seafood of any kind, poultry like chicken and turkey, nuts and seeds, and legumes. And legumes are anything in the bean family like chickpeas, lentils, black beans. It's recommended to have several servings each week of fish, nuts, and legumes, and around a serving each of a nice lean poultry like a chicken or a turkey, a low-fat dairy product, or even some eggs. And of course, in the Mediterranean diet, olive oil is absolutely a staple. And in a few slides, we're actually going to go over some tips on how to choose a really good quality olive oil. Because unfortunately, there's some types out there on the shelves that might not be as good as others. And so I've got some good tips for you so that you can learn how to choose a good quality, healthy olive oil. On the limiting side, it is recommended that red meats and sweets like cakes and cookies and pastries be limited to no more than one serving each per week. And the Mediterranean diet is also really largely based in whole, minimally processed or unprocessed foods. So really getting any highly processed foods out of the diet is important if you want to follow a Mediterranean diet. And the Mediterranean diet is actually not just a diet, it is a lifestyle, which is, really important. So it's not just about the food that we eat, but it's also about the way that we eat it. And so much of the um, much of the energy around food in the Mediterranean countries is that it's like a celebration. So there's a lot of purposeful enjoyment that shines through all the aspects, not just during the mealtime, but how the foods are, grown and prepared and thought through and purchased and everything, start to finish. There's also regular physical activity that's important in the Mediterranean lifestyle. Good, effective stress management, rest and relaxation practices. So focus in on getting a good night's sleep, and also those stress management and relaxation types of practices. And we'll also go into a little bit about moderate alcohol consumption as well. Though it is recommended that people who do not drink should not start drinking, even though it is, permitted in moderation on a Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet actually has many health benefits, and we'll go through them, the general list next. First, there's actually easier weight management. It is a healthy diet, including, as I mentioned before, lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and food that the human body really does appreciate. The portion sizes are very reasonable. So calorically, it can really support easy or easier weight reduction and also keeping the weight off, once you take it off. Improved heart health, of course, including better cholesterol levels, better blood pressure, better blood sugar control. This is good not just for diabetics, but also for people who are looking to lose a few pounds. Reduced chronic inflammation. This is an important one because the Mediterranean diet really supports reduced chronic inflammation from a couple different standpoints. And these benefits are actually lending themselves really strongly into the heart health and lower blood sugar diabetic benefit of the Mediterranean diet. So not only does it include many things that are very good for us and very supportive, like antioxidants and fiber in our system, but it is also really limiting or restricting foods that do tend to kick up inflammation, which are those more processed foods, the refined sugars, the refined flour, and really like a lot of deep fried or commercially deep fried foods really don't find their way into the Mediterranean diet. And that can be really helpful in controlling inflammation in the human body. And the lower chronic inflammation also does help to lower cancer risk. And there's also some improved mental health benefits with the Mediterranean diet, especially when adequate sleep and good stress management skills are put into play as well. All right, now let's take a little bit of a deeper look into the Mediterranean diet. So as I mentioned earlier, daily plant foods. So it's recommended that in your Mediterranean diet plan that you include a wide variety of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains at each meal or snack. So as many different types of fruits and vegetables, different colors, all the better because all plant foods have their strengths and their relative weaknesses. So when you get a variety, you're really allowing the foods to provide you with the best of what they have. When you're choosing your plant foods, choosing fresh, frozen, or low sodium, low sugar canned fruits and vegetables are all fine. I mean, primarily the diet ideally would have mostly fresh. But if you do frozen, just make sure that any vegetables don't have any sauces or seasonings on them because that does tend to add sodium and saturated fat, which are less healthy. And when choosing fruit, if you're choosing frozen fruit, you want to look for unsweetened so that there's not additional unnecessary added sugars coming into the diet. And then every once in a while, and just for convenience, having some canned foods on hand is certainly fine. But once again, you really want to look for and seek out low sodium versions of canned foods or no sugar added with the fruit. And I will tell you, in the realm of the legumes, the beans, it takes a long time to cook beans if you're using a dried bean. And so getting a canned version of a legume, like a black bean or a kidney bean, is certainly fine. And there are many, many low sodium varieties of legumes out there, and it can make them a lot more convenient to get into the diet. And we're going to talk more about legumes in the next slide. And then really making sure that you are limiting those refined starches. So those highly processed, breads or cereals, and really looking for more whole, minimally processed bread, cereals, things like potatoes, brown rice, in the realm of pasta, perhaps a whole grain or a legume-based pasta. And then use heart-healthy cooking methods where you're not adding in a lot of additional sodium or, butter, things that have high saturated fat when you're cooking them. For serving sizes, for fruit, a half to a whole cup would be considered a serving size. For veggies, a half cup cooked or 1 cup raw. And then for the whole grains or starchy vegetables like potatoes, peas, and corn, you're aiming for about a half cup as a serving size. a standard size slice of bread, which is about an ounce, or a cup of dry cereal. Just watch out for those cereals because they can have quite a bit of added sugar in them sometimes. For healthy protein foods, primarily on the Mediterranean diet, we want to choose from a variety of fish and other seafood, including at least a serving or even two of those seafood items that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids. And omega-3 fatty acids are heart healthy, anti-inflammatory fats, so they can really help to promote that reduced inflammation in the human body. And that's going to be found in fish like salmon, sardines, herring, tuna, and mackerel. And of course, as I mentioned in the last slide, don't forget the legumes. I do consider them the real life magic beans. They are excellent sources of fiber, complex carbohydrate, and protein. And there is a wide variety of them. So if you don't like one kind of legume, I really do encourage you to try different ones. Some of them do carry more of a beany taste to them, and other ones are very, very mild. So, as I mentioned before, like lentils, white beans, black beans, there's kidney beans, there's red and pink beans, and that's just to name a few. And it's absolutely fine to get a canned version of them for convenience. Maybe just seek out a low sodium one if it's available. And go nuts and seeds. Nuts like walnuts, especially, and also almonds are good sources of those omega-3 fats from plants. And other good omega sources from seeds are ground flax, chia, and hemp seeds. For serving sizes, you want to aim for 3 to 4 ounces of fish about 3 times a week. For legumes, a half a cup a daily, or at the very least 3 times a week. And some places where you could add in those legumes are simply just right from the can, right onto your salad. You can add them into soups and stews and dishes like chili. Great opportunities to add in a variety of legumes. Some people like to roast legumes like chickpeas, so you can toss them in some olive oil and some low sodium spices and roast them in your oven until they get nice and crispy. And people eat those as snacks or as good toppings onto salad. And believe it or not, hummus, another legume-based dip, is not hard to make, and you don't have to use chickpeas. There are many, many really great recipes out there, for different hummus, and you can use whatever kind of bean you prefer. Nuts, about a quarter cup or 2 tablespoons is a serving size, and you can include those in about 3 times per week. And seeds, about a tablespoon daily, or even several times per week is fine. And those are nice additions onto salads as well, or into yogurt. Other good proteins, lean poultry. So choosing lean, either whole turkey or chicken, or the ground version. Skinless if you can, or if you do buy it with skin, just remove it after cooking. It's a good idea to focus mostly in on the white meat, but certainly having a little dark meat now and again is fine. For dairy products, choosing mostly low or reduced fat dairy products, or where it's reasonable fat-free. I generally don't recommend choosing just fat-free dairy products because depending on the product, sometimes the manufacturer is adding in extra stuff to replace the fat that's being taken away. So certainly a low-fat or a reduced fat is fine. But if you do enjoy fat-free yogurt or fat-free milk, those tend to be very, very simple, natural products, and the manufacturers tend not to be adding anything additional into those. And then limiting full fat cheese, just because it's high in saturated fat and can be high in sodium as well. For eggs, the recommendation is 1 whole egg per day, and certainly feel free to add extra egg whites as a really, really great high quality protein. For serving sizes, for your chicken and your turkey, 3 ounces, no more than once a day, and they don't need to be included every single day of the week. For dairy products, a serving size is considered to be a cup of milk or yogurt, or 1 to 1.5 ounces of natural cheese, depending on the fat content. So the higher fat content cheese, you should probably limit it to about an ounce. But if you're getting a part skim or a lower fat natural cheese, an ounce and a half per day is fine. And then, as I mentioned, one whole egg with no limit on egg whites, but it should be part of a balanced diet. And then the foods to limit or avoid: red meats like beef, pork, lamb, and veal, no more than one serving per week, and choose the leanest cuts. Anytime you see some visible fat, go ahead and trim it off and try to use cooking methods that allow that fat to drip away. For wine or alcohol, it's best to limit it or even avoid it if you don't already drink, or if there's any other reasons, any other medical conditions that you might have that would be beneficial to avoid alcohol. The limit for females is 1 glass, for males, 2, but ideally no more than 2 times per week. Past recommendations have mentioned that these parameters are actually okay on a daily basis, but new research actually may be pushing the recommendation to no more than 2 times per week. Minimize processed foods, and always better to make as much of them as you can at home, and that way you're in control of the quality of the flour, the quality of the oil, and the amount of sugar and sweeteners and the type of sweeteners that go into it. So 3 times per week, if it is like a homemade baked good. And absolutely, as much as possible, avoid commercially deep fried food. Unfortunately, the oil in those deep fryers gets damaged pretty quickly over time. And you just don't know the quality of the food the quality of the oil when your food went in. And they can be highly inflammatory. So, for heart health and for general health, avoiding foods that really aggravate inflammation is a good idea. And deep fried foods absolutely aggravate inflammation. Serving sizes for red meats are about 3 ounces. And if you don't know, 3 ounces is about the size of a deck of cards. The recommended serving size for wine is about 3.5 to 4 ounces. And depending on the type of baked good, will depend on what the serving size is going to be. But generally it would be something like 2 small cookies or a thin, wedge of a piece of cake. All right, a little bit on heart healthy fats. Fat should come from minimally processed whole food sources most of the time. Foods like nuts and seeds, avocados and olives, and fatty fish contain larger amounts of healthy fats, of healthier fats. So those omega-3s or monounsaturated fats, and very little of the saturated fats and trans fats, which are not nearly as good for our heart. Oils that are good sources of monounsaturated fats are extra virgin olive oil as well as avocado oil. I will often talk to people, my clients, when they come in to see me, on the advantages of having some avocado oil in the house. Though olive oil is wonderful and has some really great heart health benefits, it can burn or smoke if your temperature that you're cooking at is too high. And avocado oil will take the advantage here because it is a little bit more heat stable. And it will provide you with some good monounsaturated fats as well. And then a lesser known oil is chia oil, which comes from chia seeds, and it is a good source of omega-3 fatty acids. So if you're not somebody who likes to take like a fish oil supplement, perhaps including some chia oil in your diet would be a good way to make sure that you're getting enough omega-3s. In general, when you're choosing these oils, you want to look for cold pressed and unrefined, or if it is refined, being labeled as more naturally refined. And the Mediterranean guidelines do allow for actually quite a bit of oil, 1 to 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil every day. Okay, so as promised earlier, I want to go through a few tips so that you can identify what a high quality olive oil might look like. And this is actually from an article from Epicurious. So if you want to look into the article for more details, it's called Fake Olive Oil, 7 Ways to Spot It. And I'm just going to go through the tips just in general with you here today. The first one is to look for labels that say extra virgin olive oil. Avoid all others. So if it simply just says olive oil or pure or light or even just virgin olive oil, it's not the same as extra virgin olive oil. And probably a good idea just to skip over those and leave those behind. If the bottle has a harvest date, an estate or mill name, it's a good idea. More details usually indicate better quality. And then there's another factor. It's called an FFA level, which stands for free fatty acidity level. If that is on there, a 0.2 or lower is considered an excellent quality of olive oil. Ignore best by and bottled on dates. This is one of those things that that might seem kind of shocking, but unfortunately, what can happen sometimes is olives can be harvested and made into oil, and then that oil can get stored for sometimes an indeterminate amount of time, usually up to about a year. And so when it's bottled on, actually might not be really indicative of how close it was to actually being harvested. So these dates tend to be a little less reliable. Look for third-party certifications. There's many different groups out there that certify olive oil. A few that are mentioned in the article are the California Olive Oil Council and European Union's Protected Designation of Origin. But like I said, feel free to look up the article if you want more details on that. And this is a nifty little general tip. If it's coming out of Australia or Chile, buy it. And the recommendation is simple because both of these countries have very strict standards just in and of themselves. And so if they are manufacturing it, chances are a lot of the other worrisome things have already been, taken care of, and you don't really need to worry about it. So those are good quality. As with most things, fancy packaging and high price doesn't always indicate quality. You really want to look for the other details in the olive oil. But in terms of the actual package, olive oil is more protected if it's in a dark color and preferably a glass bottle versus clear or plastic. And trust your senses, literally, in smell and taste. And so the author of this article mentions that fake olive oil might taste greasy, rancid, flavorless, or just not pleasant. But good olive oil, on the other hand, should smell and taste green, bright, peppery, earthy, grassy, or any combination. And in the end, he basically says, if it tastes good, it probably is a good quality olive oil. All right, so over the next couple of slides, I'm going to just go through a few examples on how to build a healthy day using Mediterranean diet guidelines. All right, we'll start with breakfast and we'll give you 3 good options. All right, the first one, some nice grains from some whole grain steel cut oatmeal, and you can make that with water or low fat milk. Some fresh berries. We'll add in more of those plant foods, some ground flax seeds for the omega-3, and a hard-boiled egg for some protein. Another option could be whole grain toast with some no sugar added natural nut butter. You can do a peanut butter or an almond butter, or really any kind of nut butter that you like. Low sugar Greek yogurt with fresh fruit. And a third option could be an egg plus some egg whites to mix together and create a veggie omelet. And you can have it with a slice of whole grain sourdough bread that's topped with a little fresh garlic and some of that really good quality olive oil that you were able to find. For lunch, one option could be a mixed green salad topped with some reduced sodium tuna and some white beans, some extra virgin olive oil and vinegar dressing, and a squeeze of lemon. Sandwiches are common for lunch, and there's no reason why you can't make a sandwich or a wrap with a Mediterranean flair. So, whole grain bread or a whole grain wrap with some fresh chicken salad made with some diced white meat chicken, walnuts, apples, a little bit of mayonnaise, some of that extra virgin olive oil, and a little bit of salt and pepper and garlic for some flavor. And you can have those with a nice veggie side of baby carrots or any raw vegetable of your choice. And getting a good sized bowl of a reduced sodium vegetable soup. And if we add some lentils or some other beans into it, like the small pink beans, as well as a big veggie variety, we're really getting some fiber and some really, really good plant foods. And if you'd like, you can have that with a small slice of whole grain or sourdough bread. Some dinner options could be some fresh salmon topped with lemon and dill, some whole grain brown rice and mixed vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, and feel free to sprinkle a little sharp cheddar cheese on top. Some cabbage leaves stuffed with lean ground turkey, quinoa, tomatoes, spinach, onions, and garlic, and topped with a fresh tomato sauce. And once again, we can even have a heart healthy version of some pizza on a Mediterranean diet. So, using a whole grain mini crust, no more than 2 ounces, or even a whole grain English muffin, you can drizzle it with some olive oil and some fresh minced garlic. Top each side with some spinach leaves, a nice big thick slice of tomato, and about an ounce of a nice fresh mozzarella cheese. Um, and that's a small portion size, so feel free to have a good a little side salad, some mixed vegetables with some olive oil and vinegar dressing. And then, of course, some snacks. 3/4 of a cup of fresh fruit, as much variety in there, the better. And you can top that with a half cup plain or low sugar vanilla Greek yogurt to get your protein. A third of a cup of nut and seed mix with a couple tablespoons of no sugar added dried fruit as a nice healthy trail mix. Mixed raw vegetables with a few whole grain crackers and a few tablespoons of hummus, whether you buy it commercially or you make it yourself, is a great balanced snack. I've provided you here with a few resources, and there are many, many, many resources out there on Mediterranean food diet. But the first and the third will give some additional recipes. So there's Cleveland Clinic has 7 Mediterranean diet recipes to fuel a healthy lifestyle. And recently, eatingwell.com put out a month's worth of Mediterranean diet dinner recipes that you can try out. So lovely resources there. And then the center link is for the Cleveland Clinic, and it does actually have a really nice, just general it's a picture of a Mediterranean diet food list in case you're just picking and choosing for your own meals. All right, so that's what I have for you for the Mediterranean diet. We're going to move now into intermittent fasting, which is a little different than the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is it's very gentle and it's very balanced. And intermittent fasting can be pretty extreme, depending on how people are approaching fasting. So I want to talk about this in some details. So the question is whether fasting or intermittent fasting is a healthy or effective diet practice. Unfortunately, even though fasting itself is something that's been around for a long time, intermittent fasting has really not been very well studied at this time. So the recommendations that I'll be giving you today are going to be based on just known healthy nutrition information and advice. There are some factors that you need to consider if you're considering doing any type of fasting. There are certain disease conditions, medication or medication regimens that need to be considered, as well as past dieting practices, where your metabolism is at, how much you exercise, and the type of fasting that you're considering. Possible side effects during the fasting process can include dehydration, nutrient deficiencies, digestive issues like bloating, mood changes, sleep disturbances, headache, and fatigue. Now, most of these are occurring just while people are actually going through the fasting and do tend to clear up after you go back to a normal eating pattern. But if the fasting practice is too extreme, the human body may respond by lowering metabolism. And this can be far more long lasting and far more problematic in long term weight management. But all of these depend on the type and duration of the fast. And of course, everybody is different and everybody can experience a fast differently. So, some common fasting variations that are out there, and I mention this because fasting is about as individual as there are different people. And so everybody seems to be doing it a little bit differently, which probably makes it really hard to study. So, one type is a multi day long fast, often for 3 days or more. These can be common in some religious practices. Some can be continuous, while others are just going to restrict where you are fasting only certain hours of the day, and then you're allowed to eat during other hours of the day. It's really important for you to maintain adequate hydration and electrolyte balance, especially if it is a continuous fast where you're not eating anything in the span of a 24-hour period of time, making sure that you're getting water and any allowed beverages like plain coffee or tea. Lots of times, like a bone broth may be allowed as well. There's also something called a fast mimicking diet. Usually, these are about 5 days in duration. They include a very specific type of diet, being mostly protein and fat forward, because they do usually the purpose is to promote some short term ketosis, but they do allow limited calories each day, usually during a very limited feeding time. So you're not eating little bits continuously throughout the day, but typically just over a few hour period of time, and then continuing to fast for the remainder of the day for those 5 days. Um, Much of the fasting that's out there that I hear people talk about really falls more under the category of time restricted eating. And usually, again, this is a specific window of time when eating is allowed. And a lot of times, the type of food is not restricted. So basically, people can eat whatever they want, but only for certain hours of the day. And very typically, it's a 6 hour window, but can go upwards of an 8 hour window. And then there's just the general terminology of intermittent fasting, which, like I said, can be highly variable, but usually involves skipping one meal per day. And typically it's breakfast or dinner, so that you can extend out the fasting period over the span of a day. All right, so a few fasting recommendations. First, if you take medications that require food, you will need to choose a type of fast that allows those medications to be taken as ordered. So you don't want to skip your medications and you don't want to take them without food, if that is what is recommended. This list is not all inclusive, but if you have medical conditions like diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, or kidney issues, you really do need to consult your doctor and a registered dietitian before embarking on a fasting practice, just to find out if it really is healthy for you or if there are specific considerations that you'll need to put into play. And my belief is that fasting truly should be done intermittently, that it can be effective for losing a little bit of weight, or even just sort of shaking things up in the human body, so that if you're in a pattern of having difficulty getting away from certain types of foods, sometimes doing a short fast can give you a little bit of an advantage. But when they're done day in and day out, day after day, week after week, month after month, The human body tends not to appreciate it too much, and usually ends up not working very well. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of people come to me and I hear the same statement that they used to do intermittent fasting and it was really working, but now when they do it, it doesn't work anymore. And I think the reason for it is because your body was able to pick up the pattern of it and unfortunately didn't like it and probably ended up decreasing metabolism. And the lower your metabolism is, the harder it is to lose weight and to keep weight off. All right, so for healthy individuals, fasts that are several days long are best done infrequently. For an example, every two, or I should say 2 to 4 times per year, spaced out every 3 to 6 months. So very, very infrequent and certainly not back to back. Fast mimicking diets can be done more frequently, but I recommend no more than once or twice a month and just for that 5-day period of time. And sessions should be separated by a week or more. If you're choosing to try some time restricted eating, this could be done 2 or even 3 days out of the week, but should be varied. So don't always skip the same meal and don't always eat the same foods. Ideally, allow for an eating time frame of 8 to 10 hours. And intermittent fasting for longer time frames should be customized so that side effects like nutrient deficiencies and decreased metabolism are avoided. And a few more general fasting tips. Avoid skipping breakfast unless the fast extends beyond 24 hours. Break your fast with a morning meal. That's the whole reason why breakfast is called breakfast. It's breaking a fast. Some people work odd shifts. So breakfast really is going to be considered whatever your first meal is after you wake up. Avoid skipping the same meal day after day if you're following a temporary time-restricted eating pattern. If foods are permitted on the type of fast that you're doing, choose a variety of minimally processed healthy foods and keep the meals as balanced as possible. Like I said, many of these fasting diets are going to be more protein and healthy fat forward and may end up restricting, carbohydrates in order to promote some of that, ketosis, which is fine for the human body for most people for short periods of time, but not long-term ketosis generally is actually not very healthy. But if some carbs are allowed, allowing small amounts of them in each time you eat is important. When the fast is over, your body might not be ready for a huge amount of food. So you want to reintroduce foods in small portions and focus on foods that are light, healthy, and well balanced. Light exercise, especially short routines that incorporate muscle endurance, are typically safe, and they're even advisable to help preserve lean mass during a fast. But you don't want to exercise so vigorously because your energy levels are going to be a little bit depleted. And there can be some differences in how your body handles blood sugar management as well. So vigorous exercise is not recommended. Good quality sleep is very important. And if you have any health concerns, talk to your medical provider before fasting. And if you are fasting and experience any adverse side effects, it is important to stop immediately and get right back into eating those light, healthy foods. And then the last thing for the intermittent fasting is just a couple of examples of some of the longer term intermittent fasting that many people end up interested in trying. So some intermittent fasting can last for in the vicinity in the range of 20 to 24 hours. And so what I would recommend is to eat breakfast early and then fast for the 24 hours and so that you're starting with breakfast the next day. For a 20-hour fast, stop eating a little later, like around noon, and then resume eating at 8 a.m. the next day. And don't do this any more than one time per week. For a slightly shorter fast, like in the range of 14 to 18 hours, try to eat two moderate meals or even three smaller meals between morning breakfast time and late afternoon or early evening so that the fasting duration can end around 8 a.m. the next day. So, again, we're trying to avoid skipping the breakfast. And this shorter term intermittent fasting could be done a little bit more frequently, but no more than 2 to 3 times per week. And I usually recommend that you put at least a day in between, so no consecutive days. All right. Once again, I thank you for attending today's presentation. And next up, I will be more than happy to answer some of your questions.
Wow, Brandy, thank you so much for that great presentation. I really learned a lot. I hope our audience felt that it was very helpful too. And there are a couple of questions to start. Uh, let's see. The first one, uh, if you are pre-diabetic and watching your sugar, aren't the fruits and veggies full of carbs?
So fruits do have natural simple sugar in them. And so for anybody with prediabetes or diabetes, I always recommend, first and foremost, don't restrict fruit, but eat it along with a protein. So something that has a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat. That could be some like reduced fat, low sugar yogurt. That could be like a reduced fat cottage cheese. That could be some nuts or some natural peanut butter. I always like to take the opportunity to point out with natural peanut butter that it's actually really important to look at the ingredients list and to see that it is either just nuts or nuts and a little bit of salt and nothing more than that. But fruits actually do provide us with a tremendous amount of nutrients and hydration and fiber, which are actually really important and really protective for people in all aspects of health, including diabetes, prediabetes, and heart disease. And vegetables, most vegetables are actually very low in carbohydrates, high in nutrients and fiber. The exceptions to those would be things like potatoes, peas, and corn. Of those, I would say corn probably has the least nutritional value overall. So if you want to avoid that, go ahead. But little bits of the other ones, small portion controlled, are absolutely fine.
Thank you. Another question, you had mentioned salmon is being good, but can you advise which is best, farmed or wild caught, Atlantic salmon, sockeyed salmon, king salmon, others? I just know there are different options there, and some are more expensive than others. So if there are better or worse choices, it would be good to know.
Um, I agree. I don't have a lot of details on that. In general, wild caught salmon um, is seen as the healthier option, just because the animals do have a more varied diet and wouldn't be subject to some of the practices that are involved in the farm raising. However, a simple search on the internet does point out that there are some regions where some of the farm raised actually are pretty safe. And I think that it really comes down more from moderation. So there are lots of ways to get omega-3 fats in. So if salmon is coming in, at 3 or 4 ounces, just once a week, any way that you can get it in through a reputable seafood wholesaler is probably the best way to go.
Terrific. Thank you. The next question, soda consumption, in particular, the sugar-free diet varieties and colas.
So is the question about if the sugar-free are healthier?
I would imagine it might go to that question earlier about pre-diabetes and sugar. So this, I believe that they're asking about about sodas and in particular the sugar-free diet varieties, I guess versus one versus the other.
Sure. So I'm going to have to say that in general, soda is not particularly healthy. It is definitely one of the more processed beverages out there. And I think it's kind of a tight competition as to what's worse for you. Highly processed refined white sugar that contains calories versus the more processed sugar alternatives, like the Sweet and Low, the Equal, the Splenda. Um, I think there is probably some legitimate health concerns related to all of those. There are some sodas out there that are made with some more natural sugar alternatives, things like pure stevia or pure monk fruit. At this point, it looks like they may take a little bit of an advantage over the just standard sugar sweetened soda or the diet and zero products.
Great, thank you. Uh, this next question, you mentioned whole grain bread. How do I determine if bread is really whole grain and not just bread that is only advertised as whole grain?
Good question. So anything that is 100% whole grain is basically what you're looking for. It's certainly worth picking up the package. And then how we tell that that is really and truly true is going to that ingredients list. And the first ingredient in a bread that is truly whole grain is going to be, it's going to say either 100% whole grain or it's going to say something like 100% whole wheat.
Terrific. Thank you. The next question, what is the difference between steel cut oatmeal and regular old fashioned oatmeal?
So I I think probably before steel cut became, popular, um, well, I shouldn't say that. It's always going to be how it's manufactured, being a steel cut versus, being not. But just in terms of like health in general, um, most unprocessed or minimally processed steel cut oats are going to contain more fiber. They're going to require a longer cooking time, which actually means it's indicative of the grain actually being left more intact rather than processed by the food industry. However, there is some instant steel cut oats out there now. And it kind of depends on how much they've been processed. So usually, what I tell people, the recommendation for oats is to try to find something like a steel cut, a traditional Scottish or Irish oatmeal. Look for a good high fiber content, like 3 grams per half cup cooked, which is a general standard portion size, and a long cooking time. Um, because the longer it takes to cook, the less processed it is.
Mm, great, thank you. The next question, I have heart disease, so have been reading a lot to try to reduce the plaque. It's said that olive oil damages endothelium in the arteries. Thoughts on that?
I'd have to look into, the article and the sources of that kind of information. In general, it really is recommended not to focus in on any one particular part of the diet, because everything has its benefits and its drawbacks. So the amount of olive oil that is recommended in the diet is not excessive. And of course, we want to make sure that once again, it's really good, truly high quality olive oil, because some of the knockoffs could end up with be blends of other oils that may not end up having the same heart health benefits, to them. So it's not just about the olive oil, but it's about all the other foods that come into the diet as well. Because, like I said, everything brings a benefit, but there's no food is perfect. And so eating too much of any one thing can cause just as many problems as excluding healthy foods from the diet. Um, and that's also another good reason, maybe to not choose just olive oil, but to use some olive oil, use some avocado oil, and maybe even consider some of that omega-3 rich chia oil as well.
Excellent strategy. Thank you. Looks like we're rounding. Oops, wait, maybe we have one more question. Um, I want to mention before we close that this webinar is being recorded. Oh, they said thank you. Um, and you gave some really great links, and I loved your planning for the Mediterranean diet. So if people want to refer back to that, we have recorded it. It will be on baystatehealth.org/heart series. And lots of thank yous for the talk today. Oh, well, there's one last question. What are your thoughts on tofu?
Oh, um, so it's really important to get soy from manufacturers that treat it properly. Which means that it's going to go through like a good soaking process. Soy is one of those legumes that does have some toxicity to it, and so if it's manufactured too quickly, some of those toxins can get left behind. Unfortunately, it's not really obvious on any package how that soy has been treated. So if it's something that you eat frequently, I would say maybe contact the manufacturer and get an idea of what their soaking practices are. But I think going for a well-known brand, maybe even an organic version of it, and just moderating tofu and soy and just as with the olive oil and many things, variety really protects us better than just about everything else. So just having a wide variety of different sources coming in.
Great. Thank you. Uh, there is another question. I'm pre-diabetic. How many carbs should I eat daily?
So that really all depends on how many calories you need in general. So just for an example, if just for ease, if it's a 2,000 calorie diet, you probably want to get. I certainly don't think that you need 50% of your calories coming in from carbohydrates, but you probably need at least 30%. So on so 2 times 3 is 6, so that would be 600 calories worth of carbohydrates. Coming in 600 to 800 is probably about right, spread out. And again, once again, always paired up with proteins. Carbohydrates affect blood sugar more when they're eaten by themselves versus in the setting of a balanced meal or snack.
Wonderful. Well, Monica says, thank you for a great presentation. And Alice says, wonderful information. Thank you. And I agree. And
You're
thank you
very
to our
welcome.
audience for these great questions and Brandy for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure.